Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Gutoskie. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a senior methodologist at Statistics Canada. Today, I'll be walking you through how my team approached migrating legacy SaaS workflows to R. Not just the technicalities around it, but how this worked organizationally as well as collaboratively. This will be a tour of the process, the philosophy, and our lessons learned. So this is what I'll be covering today. First, the context of open source migration at Statistics Canada. Next, I'll touch on a bit of what I do as a survey methodologist. After that, I'll be discussing the migration philosophy and the challenges that arose. Um, After that, I'll talk about the team-based migration approach, and finally, some of our lessons learned. So let's start with the broader context of open source migration at Statistics Canada. Statistics Canada is Canada's national statistical agency. We currently have over 450 active surveys and have a strong commitment to data confidentiality. So, modernizing the tools behind these surveys is essential to staying efficient and responsive to Canadians' needs. Statistics Canada right now is in the middle of a major business transformation. Not only are we gradually moving away from proprietary tools like SAS towards flexible open source tools like R and Python, but we're also improving our data management platforms and exploring ways that we can leverage generative AI in this transformation. So, to understand the migration work for my team, it'll probably help to understand a little bit of the role of a survey methodologist at Statistics Canada. Sort of in brief, we design the statistical backbone of surveys from sampling, collection methodology, weighting, edited imputation, and estimation. Uh, these are the processes that we work on. And many of these core processes were originally built in SAS. So survey methodologists are heavily involved in this migration to open source. Next, I'll share our philosophy for migrating and the challenges that shaped it. So Statistics Canada, our move towards R wasn't just about switching tools. It really was about setting ourselves up for the future. Cost was certainly part of it, especially since our SaaS licenses were coming up for renewal in 2028. But cost alone wasn't the driving factor. We really wanted tools that would help us grow. The art ecosystem was a big attraction, especially with the huge range of packages, especially for survey methodology, covering from sampling and weighting and imputation. Um, we also had many internal tools that we rely on that have already been rebuilt in R. So it made this adoption feel much more natural for us as a team. Um, we're also drawn to the open source community. So really, instead of relying on a single vendor, we benefit from thousands of collaborators continuously improving the tools. When we run into challenges, there's often already a solution or a discussion out there. And finally, R integrates really well with this broader modern tool set. Things like Git and Python, um, which is much more widely used at the agency. Um, it's much easier to work collaboratively with these tools. And we're much more flexible than before. So this migration really wasn't just about moving away from SAS. It was about moving towards a more modern, connected, and sustainable way of working. Our migration philosophy really shaped the success for the project. Our first major thinking point was that we want to match the output and not the code. A literal translation of SAS to R almost always produces code that looks really unnatural and quite brittle. Um, SAS logic often evolved over the years with iterative patches and workarounds. So if we tried to re-implement this logic as is in R, we would have just been dragging forward this technical debt. So instead, we asked ourselves, what's the intent of this code? And once we understood that, we were able to rebuild it cleanly in R, sometimes with entirely different logic under the hood, but as long as that the outputs matched our production requirements. Second, we prioritize clarity over cleverness. R really does give you many ways to write fancy code, um, but clever code can age poorly, while clear and concise code really does age well. So we really tried to optimize this for someone who could be opening the script a year later and will hopefully immediately understand what's going on. So down the road, this will really help us with onboarding and code review. Third, we really wanted to find common approaches. With multiple surveys using similar steps like weight calibration or sample allocation, we really wanted to standardize these within the team. This directly fed into building shared internal packages. Before migration, the team often solved the same problem like in 5 different ways. But after with this migration, we really wanted to solve it once and reuse this solution many different times. And finally, we want to treat this migration as modernization. This isn't just a translation exercise. This isn't a mechanical rewrite of our code. This migration really was an opportunity to simplify our code, to remove dead logic, to automate manual steps, and incorporate tools that we didn't have before. Things like unit tests, version control, reproducible environments. So this was really the mindset that we put ourselves in for long-term sustainability in this migration. Now, this migration is still ongoing, and much like any other project, there are challenges. On the technical side, data integrity is a big one. As we all know, SAS and R handle data quite differently by default, whether that's different data types, missing values, sorting rules. All of these can be seen as subtle differences, but these small differences can really snowball into unexpected discrepancies. So we had to set out clear expectations for what matching outputs meant. And we really had to build new validation habits from this. So we didn't want to, there was always a bit of leeway in what our outputs looked like, but we wanted to make sure that what we were getting is still what we were expecting. We also had to rethink how we handle large data sets. SAS is quite good at disk-based processing, while R lives in RAM most of the time. So that really pushed us to explore tools like Arrow and DuckDB and chunk data's streaming approaches to avoid memory bottlenecks. Another challenge was that the legacy logic could be quite complex and difficult to follow. You could really think of some of these SAS programs as archaeological digs, just layers of fixes over the years with unclear variable names and a lot of undocumented steps. So sometimes it really took a long time to understand what was happening in the code, and sometimes understanding the code took a lot longer than actually rewriting it. Capacity building was also a really big challenge. My team has decades of SAS experience, but relatively little hands-on R experience. So we really have those SAS habits deeply ingrained, whether it's macro programming or data step thinking, implicit handling of types and joins. So we really had to retrain our brains to have this R way of thinking, vectorization, functions, testing, modularity, stuff like that. And finally, organizational changes. Mid-migration, new corporate standards came out, and this is still ongoing. But so, for example, the Parquet file format was decided corporately as the preferred analytical file format. So once this was announced, this really meant that we had to revisit a lot of our assumptions and had to rework some of our ingestion pipelines to ensure that our code was future proof. This migration happens in a shifting environment, and staying flexible was really key. So, the team based code migration. One of our strongest decisions was really making this migration employee led rather than centrally dictated. We ran a series of workshops where each team member walked us through their actual workflow end to end, not the code, but the actual process. So they were telling us things like where the inputs come from, who uses the outputs, what kind of pain points are there any manual steps, are there SaaS specific behaviors that we have to rethink in R. So this revealed things that were invisible in the legacy code, like steps that existed only because of SaaS limitations, or transformations that are no longer required, or assumptions that have been made years ago, and don't hold today. We also asked each person to identify what they would improve if they could redesign their process from scratch. So this migration really gave us permission to rethink everything, and it gave my my employees uh, the freedom of sort of not being set in the this is the way things have always been mentality. And that level of engagement created a lot of buy-in and resulted in better designs overall. Open communication was also a pillar of the entire migration. Um, we had standardized shared platforms, using Microsoft Teams for a lot of our communications, hosting our code on GitLab, all of this to avoid information being siloed and scattered across email threads. Every decision, every issue, every improvement request was visible to everyone on the team. And this ensured that transparency was kept, the whole team aligned throughout the entire project. We also built migration updates into our existing team meetings, even if it was just a 5 or 10 minute update. This small habit really did help prevent drift and make sure that we were able to tackle problems early on. We also had regular demos that was really well received by the team. Seeing a migrated step work in R, even if it was just an early prototype, really did help build the momentum and help ease the team into working with R. Because really, people need to see this progress, not just hear about it. We also stayed connected with other teams across Statistics Canada who were migrating their code at the same time. There's a huge benefit in sharing solutions. Someone else may have already solved the problem that you're stuck on. So, for example, two of the team members sat on divisional working groups, and I participated in an agency-wide open source committee. And these networks really did save us time and helped ensure that our work aligned with broader organizational directions. Um, our technical strategy really is what made this migration sustainable. So we really wanted to focus on modular code. Instead of the 2,000 line SAS scripts that we had, we wanted to break these up into small testable R functions. This made the logic a lot easier to understand, a lot easier to review and to reuse. So if a step was repeated across surveys, we would only have to write it once. Next, we tried to use consistent standards across our coding. We aligned our naming conventions, our file structure, our error handling patterns, documentation style, even how functions should return outputs. This consistency really helped the team learn R, and to be this unit where we didn't have to relearn each script from scratch. There's this consistency in everything that we were doing. Shared R packages were a game changer. When we realized that all of our surveys used almost the same tools, whether it's a lot of validation functions or metadata standards, for example, we wanted to centralize these into internal packages. Um, so this gave us a single source of where our code was housed, and it made onboarding dramatically easier for when individual surveys were doing their migration, as well as in the future when we have to do any other future work on new surveys. And then we have our testing framework. Our SaaS workflows rarely had any formal unit tests. So in R, we use the test that package to verify that migrated functions produce the same results as our legacy SaaS outputs. It also gave us confidence to refactor our code without fear of things breaking in production. And finally, the tools don't migrate the code, it's the team. So training and capacity building were essential. Um, we I we encouraged the team to use available internal R training resources plus hand-on exercises built around real production steps, because the learning really does stick better when it's tied to our actual work. We also did peer code review, which helped both the reviewer as well as the author of the code, where the reviewers learned by seeing different coding styles and the authors learned from suggestions and simplifications. The review also naturally pushed the team towards a more consistent style without having really strict rules. We also relied on informal mentoring. Staff that had more R experience made themselves more available for troubleshooting, brainstorming, and pair programming sessions. Um, and also, we leaned on the broader R user community, both within our larger methodology group as well as agency-wide user groups. Having the support network really helps people feel less isolated during a big transition like this. So to wrap up, I just wanted to touch on some of the lessons learned that we took away. So even though, as I mentioned, that this migration is still ongoing, we've identified some lessons learned that we think would help other teams in a migration to open source. First and foremost, adaptation is essential. Migration is rarely linear, and requirements will change. You'll have new challenges, timelines will shift. So teams that are able to adapt quickly will be the ones that are set up for success. You'll want to start earlier than you think. Even simple programs can contain hidden dependencies or edge cases. So earlier starts really reduce that stress during a production cycle and gives you time for proper code testing and validation. And finally, find a community. Migration is much easier when you're connected to others doing the same thing. Sharing ideas, failures, and solutions really do accelerate everyone's progress. And open source thrives on community, and our migration benefited hugely from that. So, with that, thank you for listening to my talk, and I'd be happy to take any questions.